Hey everyone, this is Robert Keens with goldsilverpros.com. It is Tuesday, October 27th, 2020. And the subject of today's video is going to be an extension on what I've been covering the last few weeks on the IMF and global currencies. We're going to extend that into what they're calling the Great Reset, along with the World Economic Forum, and how those two agencies, international agencies, are planning this global reset across the financial sector, not only including currencies, but including everything. I'm going to show you a lot of data and research today. So I've got my handy dandy notes here on the side, so I may refer to that throughout the presentation, my outline over what we're going over. For those of you expecting a precious metals market report today, I'm not going to do one this week because we have the election next week. And right now, there's not a lot going on in the precious metal market. They're basically sideways trading like I thought they would leading up to the election. Now, we may see a little bit of a pop on Friday or Monday. I'm not expecting too much until the election gets going. We start seeing some of the results, and either side of the political debate makes their opinions known and how that affects the overall markets. I think it'll affect the markets. And I think it'll affect the precious metals. So expect precious metal update from me next week, but right now there's not a lot going on. So we're going to continue what's even more important in the bigger picture, and that is the Great Reset that's coming. And at the end of the day, why you want to have precious metals in your portfolio. This is a major reason why. So I think this right now actually is a little bit more important because it speaks to why you need to have precious metals and why the precious metals should be going up in the future. We'll go ahead and start the screen share today. Now I'm going to show you some informational clips, some video clips as we go along, as well as some written material, some article content throughout the presentation. I won't go too long on the video clips, but I did highlight certain areas of them. This is an interview with Christine Lagarde, the IMF, posted 5 years ago at Daily Motion. The reason I picked this video clip is because it's 5 years old, and it shows that they've been talking publicly about the Great Reset, not only in 2020, but for several years. This is not a new concept. And again, this is something I picked up on last year and began talking about in my article series on my website, goldsilverpros.com. Here, Christine Lagarde is talking about resetting the world economy, and that it includes several things, including financial sector regulatory environment changes, monetary policies, which we talked about with the electronic currencies, and affecting the overall type of growth. So we'll go ahead and get that started here.
Massive unemployment, north of 200 million people who do not have a job at the moment, and a growth rate that is going at too slow a pace to actually respond to the market needs in terms of job creation. And we have still an unbalanced growth and uneven growth. Unbalanced, there has been some rebalancing, but we're not there yet. And the question is, will it last when the recovery does consolidate further? Now, in terms of new risks that we've seen, we have tapering, which is on the horizon, which is now beginning in the United States, and the spillover effects that it will have, particularly on the emerging market economies. And we have, and I'll be happy to explain also that, a low risk, but a risk there of potential deflation, particularly in Europe.
Let's start with the bubbles that you mentioned, and then we'll go through deflation. So when you say we need to reset the world economy, how do you do that?
Okay. I think the reset is on multiple fronts. Number one, the financial sector regulatory environment has to be finalized and has to be constantly re-examined, revamped, and organized in such a way that it responds to the creativity of the financial markets. That's reset number one. Reset number two that we're seeing at play at the moment is a reset of the monetary policies by most central banks of the advanced economies. They've been going into unconventional territories. They've done a great job at keeping the crisis at the level where it was. But now gradually they're going to have to move to another monetary policy. I don't know whether it will be the old monetary policy, but it will certainly be different from what we have seen in terms of unconventional and use of quantitative easing tools and other instruments that they've used. I think there is also a need for reset in terms of the type of growth that is expected. And by that...
Okay, so the video segment ends there. She's talking about type of growth. And essentially what she's talking about there is 5 years ago, there needed to be a reset. And it's interesting to see that she's with the IMF and she's talking at the World Economic Forum. that's going to be that thread you're going to see woven throughout today's presentation. There are two major international agencies, the IMF and International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, that are talking incessantly about the reset. And she was at the World Economic Forum talking about it as a member of the IMF all those years ago and talking about what the reset would look like. Now, she didn't mention electronic currency then, but we know 5 years ago, IMF came out with a research paper I documented in the very first video in the series talking about how they would do this in the financial system. And so there you go. The reset has been a topic of conversation for a while. This is the WEF Great Reset video, World Economic Forum. It's only about 1:32. I'm going to go ahead and play the whole thing. This is playing on their website. And it's basically a very dramatic thing that you would see like in a movie theater or something along those lines, talking about all the problems that we have and how they see the need for the reset to play out. So I'm going to go ahead and play this whole clip for you guys. And notice the ominous music, the lightning, the fires, dramatic footage. Climate change theme, industrialization, protests, economic inequality. Green New Deal, carbon taxation. All right, so that video really outlines the reasons why the World Economic Forum is gunning for a reset. And we're going to talk about that through the presentation, how they're talking about many reasons why we need to do a reset, which go way beyond the financial aspects of it or the currency aspects of it, and how they're trying to tie it all together. And I'm basically going to punch a bunch of holes in that because it's really just a little bit silly in my opinion, but definitely they're getting traction with this. So it's something very serious that we need to pay attention to. I wanted to point out back in August when I did the North American Monetary Metal Summit, I hosted this summit online, it's a virtual summit. A lot of people came to it that were my subscribers before I even started doing this video series here on YouTube. We had a great session. One of those sessions was called What is This New Economy and Why Should I Care? Where I talked to both Rob Kirby of Kirby Analytics and Alex Newman of Liberty Sentinel Media. Alex Newman and I covered this great reset, including this video during that presentation. So you can see this video presentation. I've taken all of the conference sessions, put them out here on YouTube on a separate channel called the North American Monetary Metal Summit. So you just type this in to the search bar on YouTube, and you can find this video called What is This New Economy and Why This Matters. And I talked to both Alex Newman and Rob Kirby about what they're doing with the reset. This is back in August. We went in detail. This is about an hour long. If you guys want to watch it, it has a whole bunch of detail about how they're doing it, what the pillars of the reset are, what it's going to look like. So definitely a good resource for you. I'm not going to replay that entire segment for you here, but a lot of information here. Wanted to let you guys know if you hadn't made it to that online conference, it's now available on YouTube. So feel free to go ahead and view that video. Here we have, the World Economic Forum on their website. They have basically a reset video talking about the reasons why we need to do a reset. And this is the founder of the World Economic Forum, Mr. Schwab, talking about the reason why we need to do a reset. And I think his comments are very interesting. So I wanted to bring those to you guys so you can listen to his reasons for wanting to do this reset.
To see what actions we can take in this,
and his sound cuts in and out a little.
at this very delicate moment of time. The World Economic Forum is very much involved now, mobilizing all its stakeholders behind the so-called reset initiatives, which means to use this window of opportunity to formulate policies and action-oriented ideas will make the world in the post-corona era more sustainable, more cohesive, and also more resilient. And of course, humanitarian and humanitarian resilience plays here a big role. And I'm very proud that we are here joined by the members of the humanitarian resilience.
So I'm going to stop the video here. I just wanted to point out that the whole purpose of this video, and you can go through the whole thing if you want, it's right on the weforum.org website. He's talking about humanitarian crisis. They're trying to take a lot of different things, disparate concepts, humanitarian crisis, all that stuff. And you heard him say that they're basically marshaling all their forces into this great reset. So the World Economic Forum, the IMF together are working on this reset. Now they're just basically the leaders of it, the leading international agencies that are influencing world governments, central banks, and things to go along with this great reset idea. But they're very powerful. They're supranational. They don't answer to any one country, to its constitution, or to its political leaders. And so you see these supranational agencies talking about these things, trying to get all of the political leaders and financial leaders involved in this great reset. And they're having great success. And it's kind of scary. But they are putting all the resources behind it, and they do have a lot of resources because this is supported by a lot of international governments. The next thing I want to point you out to is the IMF started talking about this in June, the Great Reset, and there were remarks by the managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, and I want to walk through some of this, and you're going to see where they start talking about socialism here. And I've got an article from The Hill where they talk about how this is the great, basically, socialist reset and what they're intending to do. Her article says, now is a time that we think of what history would say about the crisis, and now is a time for all of us to find our own role. So they're using the CV virus crisis basically to direct this great reset. This is the moment in time in which we need to reset not only our financial systems, but also our way at looking at the world, and to start adopting a more worldwide socialist policy. And I would point out that that would do away with individual sovereign governments, both at the national and the state and local levels. So it can be very dangerous if you're a believer in the Constitution, a libertarian, or somebody that believes in individual freedom. These programs are very dangerous to that, because these would sit on top of the government agencies you're used to dealing with and would basically be pushing policy down to them. So 170 countries are going to finish this year with a smaller economy than the start of the year, and that's because they had lockdowns. Now, we had lockdowns when this virus wasn't killing people right and left. The death rates are very low. It is contagious. I do believe there is a virus. I don't believe it's fake. But the death rate is very, very low, but yet we started to lock down the world, and that affected the economy, and they're basically pointing that out. Well, now we need to do something about it. My point being, if you hadn't locked down all the economies, you wouldn't have this risk. But the troubles with the economy started way before we started seeing the virus take its effects in China last year, and then in the Western world, most of the Western world, starting February, March of this year. She says, so what would it take for historians to look back at this crisis as a moment of a great reset? So remember what Rahm Emanuel said, never let a crisis go to waste. They're not going to, they're going to push these policies. From the perspective of the IMF, we've seen a massive injection of fiscal stimulus to help countries deal with the crisis and shift gears for growth to return. It's of paramount importance that this growth should lead to a greener, smarter, fairer world in the future. Greener is code for socialist policies around the environment. Smarter is in terms of technocracy and expert rule and less individualism. And fairer is stuff like gender gap and racial income gap. In other words, universal basic income and those types of things. She talks about green growth. She talks about smarter growth and fairer growth. Notice how all these are bolded. This is signaling to the elites in the world that the IMF is on board with these programs, because it's an elite-driven agenda throughout the world. And that's her way of communicating, yeah, I'm on board with this great reset. And we're going to use, climate change and the virus crisis and all these things to drive, socialism across the world. Here is the video that everybody's talking about, a new Bretton Woods moment where the same lady, the director of the IMF, is here addressing the public on this opportunity for us to completely reset the financial system and why we need to do it. Bretton Woods, for those of you not aware, occurred around World War II, where the world got into trouble. We had a World War, a Great Depression. They came together with a new agreement, and the U.S. started to lead the way as a primary currency, reserve currency. And that lasted until about 1971 because it's backed by gold until Nixon took us off the gold standard. Now we're sort of post Bretton Woods, pure fiat currency regimes around the world, something we had never done in history before. And of course, that's led to massive bubbles, loss of value of income over time, more families with two parents working, more issues with families breaking up and divorce and things like that. So definitely some negative effects dating back to the 70s when we basically destroyed purchasing power of the dollar by getting off of the gold standard in the Bretton Woods agreement. And they're using this new crisis around the world caused by the shutdowns, which were done by the government types. It wasn't that 5 million people or 100 million people or 1 billion people around the world died because of the crisis. It was the shutdowns, which has caused this crisis, which are now using to drive the new currency system. And I'm not going to play the video for you here. It's too long. It goes about 12 minutes, but there's some key things that she's talking about. I'm going to talk about them. New Bretton Woods, that's revamping the monetary code for revamping the monetary system. They're talking about that here. She's talking about closing the gender gap would increase GDP by 35%. I don't know where she got those statistics. I know that since two parents have been working, that their overall share of income has gone down. Overall share of the GDP and income has gone down. And that now two parents working can't raise a family like one used to be able to. And that we have more issues with other people raising our kids, and which has allowed the public education system to take over and be the parents instead of the parents who are too busy working, just trying to make ends meet. So I have no problem closing the gender gap, women earning as much money as men, but that whole thing with women and men working with the devaluing currency really hasn't helped us out. It's been a big detriment to the families. So I think we need to rethink that system, but all they want to do is extend and promulgate that system. And that's what she talks about in this video. She's also talking about expanding internet access, which could increase GDP growth by 4%. Maybe that is the case, but really I think why they want to do it is to connect everything together so that they can implement this worldwide currency and this technocratic rule. And they need to get people in rural areas into the system and poor income people into the system so that they can basically have this interconnected system, which would allow greater and greater control by the technocrats. She's talking about financial digitalization. That's really talking about electronic money and digitization of all financial contracts into these blockchains, hashgraph systems, so that they can all be run by computer algorithms. Of course, those computer algorithms are all programmed by the people that have the money, who want more money and more control. They're not programmed by me and you, the everyday Joe, who is looking to benefit from these markets from a higher standard of living. That's the financial digitalization. And then she's talking about climate change. Now, I don't know what the heck the currency crisis and climate change have to do with each other, or the virus crisis and the climate change have to do with each other, but they got to throw in the climate change because it's a plank of the socialist agenda. If they can get climate change regulation in and regulating carbon emissions, they can control industry. When you can control industry, you can control output, you can control people's jobs, you can control growth, you can control a lot of things. It's a way for one pillar of policy to control entire industries, not only in the United States or in any given country, but across the entire world. It's a very, very dangerous program, but it's something that the IMF is wanting to put into place, not only in the United States, but across the world. Again, all of these are across the world type of things. And then she ended up the video by talking about lending. The IMF has tripled their concessions on lending, meaning they're lending triple the amount of money. And she was bragging at the beginning of the video how they got their 190th country into the IMF system. So great, they've got their 190th country now indebted to the IMF. And if they can't pay back those loans, guess what? They have to give up their local resources. And that scares the absolute hell out of the local politicians. And what it allows the IMF to do is control the local politicians. It gives them control over the politicians because they have control of the money. If you remember what Mayor Rothschild said back in the 1800s, I care not who makes the laws if you give me control of the money system, right? I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. If you give me control of the money, he can influence the law or make the law essentially. And the IMF would have control of debt of 190 nations across the world. That gives them immense control over the politicians' actions in those countries and could bring them into alignment with these IMF and World Economic Forum goals of socialism basically across the world. And so now I'm going to go to an article on the Hill talking about the Great Reset. And this is very critical of the Great Reset, but I think it's very explanatory as to what the plan is. And the person that writes it, Justin Haskins, does a really good job of decoding all the BS word speak that you get when you listen to the World Economic Forum, the IMF, and all of these types. It says, here's a quote from Klaus Schwab, who's the founder of the World Economic Forum. Every country from the United States to China must participate. So forget individual sovereignty and the wants of each of the individual people of that country. He's saying they must participate. This is IMF ordering the world to participate in this program. And every industry from oil to gas to tech must be transformed. Really? So he's one person that's saying we should transform all of our industries. Doesn't sound like independence and freedom to me. Wrote Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, in an article published on WEF's website. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. Aha, so they want to get rid of capitalism. Reset is just another word for getting rid of something and replacing it with something else. It's a softening word. What they're saying is get rid of capitalism. Why? Because at least individual freedom. That's not what they want. They want to control. Down here in this paragraph, Schwab also said that all aspects of our societies and economies must be revamped, from education to social contracts and working conditions. So basically, the World Economic Forum wants complete control out of everything. Again, forget national sovereignty, forget individual congresses, forget local and state governments, all gone. Interesting to note that joining Schwab at the WEF event was Prince Charles. We're going to see one of his quotes down here. It's very interesting that he's there. You also have Gina Gopinath, the chief economist at International Monetary Fund, again, seeing the Monetary Fund there again, IMF. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, United Nations is also one of these supernatural national entities that likes to control things around the world. And CEOs and presidents of major international corporations such as Microsoft and BP. You know, there are a lot of international corporations run by very moneyed people that want control, not only of industry, but of everything. And it does not surprise me to see major corporations behind this type of thing, this international socialist or communist model that the World Economic Forum, IMF, are putting out. Going here, the author, Justin Haskins, says, or put another way, we need a form of socialism, a word the World Economic Forum has deliberately avoided using, all the while calling for countless socialist and progressive plans. So they're trying to implement socialism without calling it socialism. Here is a quote. We need to design policies to align with investment in people and the environment, said the General Secretary of International Trade Union Confederation, Sharon Burrow. But above all, the longer term perspective is about rebalancing economies. In other words, getting rid of capitalism and bringing in socialism. Now you have Prince Charles with a quote here. Remember, don't let a good crisis go to waste. We have a golden opportunity to see something from this crisis. We're talking about the crisis we've had this year with the virus and the shutdowns. Actually, the virus didn't cause the shutdowns. The local government and state governments caused the shutdown, and some international governments called the shutdowns. Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change, said Prince Charles at the meeting, adding later, it's an opportunity we've never before had and may never have again. So in other words, the crisis with the virus and economic shutdowns may have made people more pliable to accepting international socialism and communism and giving up their independent freedom. And that's what the crisis is being used for. Regardless of who started the virus crisis, the reaction to it, it's immaterial at this point. The reaction to it of the governments and these international agencies is clearly to steer us away from freedom and into socialism, what I think is really worldwide communism. And the other thing that's really interesting, the first part of his quote is talking about something that scientists have been doing research into since the 50s. We have a golden opportunity to see something good from the crisis. Its unprecedented shockwaves may make people more receptive. In other words, if you shock the body and the brain in particular, you can make people more pliable to do things you want them to do. There's been tons of research on psychological research done on this in the US and elsewhere about how if you shock people with some event that shakes their current reality, they'd be more willing to accept an alternative solution that they wouldn't have otherwise. So this crisis we've had, the virus, which is really an economic shutdown crisis, one that probably should never have occurred in the first place, given that the damage done to the economy is much worse than the deaths caused by the virus, given the facts that we have coming out about how many deaths occur from the virus, objective facts. It's basically they're using that to change the policies around the world. It's not even in one given country no, it's around the world. It's these international agencies directing this around the world. The author, Justin Haskins, goes on to write, you may be wondering how these leaders plan to convince the world to completely alter its economy over the long run, since the crisis pandemic has most assuredly won't remain in crisis forever. The answer is that they've already identified another crisis that will require expansive government intervention, climate change. That's the Green New Deal. And so they're going to dovetail the virus crisis when it's already died down. The first wave is over. There is no big second wave, at least as of right now in October. And they're already going to dovetail back into climate change. They're going to keep bringing up shocks, these bogeyman, to force people to accept a bunch of this crap. One more quote from Prince Charles. The threat of climate change has been more gradual than the virus, but devastating reality for many people and their livelihoods around the world, and its ever greater potential to disrupt, surpass even that of the virus, Prince Charles said. So the point here is that the virus offered them an opportunity to make change, and now they're bringing on their socialist agenda and trying to tie that to the Green New Deal and all these socialist policies. They don't have a hill of beans anything to do with each other, but that's not going to stop them. And these comments coming out in this article are to condition people to accept this. When they talk about this like this, they're conditioning people to accept the new reality. And when they make you wear a mask and they shut down the economies and they pick the winners and the losers, and everything is, and they do all this stuff and it shocks people into accepting whatever they want. And then they automatically have the solution ready. And they've been thinking about it 5 years ago, because Christine Lagarde 5 years ago was talking about this as a member of the IMF to the World Economic Forum. They've already thought about the solution. All they needed was the crisis. They got the crisis. Now the solution is coming into place. It's worldwide socialism / communism. And that's why they need a reset of the financial system. And they need everybody to use basically electronic money, and they need to digitize everything so they can control it. If they can program software to control how the world works, which industries can operate because of carbon credits, if they can control the money supply, they can control the laws through these supranational agencies, then they basically have won. They can do whatever they want. There's no individual freedom. There's nowhere in the world you can go to escape this. Monetarily, you can go to gold and silver. Politically, I'm not sure what you do. I guess you fight it politically and try to make changes. But if all of these national governments are going to give into these demands from the World Economic Forum and the IMF, then my goodness, then you no longer have a U.S. Constitution. You no longer have sovereign nations. So what we should be doing right now is bugging the absolute heck out of our congressmen and talking about this and sending letters to let them know we don't like this, to provide whatever resistance we can. But I think the world's about to go through a period of great change known as the reset. And it's being pushed by these two agencies along with the UN and some others. And they're trying to do it around the world. And this is their plan. And that's why I started doing a series on the reset and started talking about all of this stuff, because I think it's important that we understand what the plan is and why they want it in place, and what things we can do to protect ourselves. So this has made the video quite long, but this is a big reason why you want to get into gold and silver and get out of the traditional financial system that, your bank accounts and other things that you may be storing your money in. And even I would even go on to say the 401ks. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not your financial advisor, but I got out of my 401ks and my pension years ago and just bought gold and silver and farmland with it. And I'm perfectly happy with those investments. I don't want to be anywhere in that paper system because I think it has a lot of risk. And if they enact worldwide socialism / communism and they digitize everything and they have all these laws around how industry can operate, there's going to be no more individual entrepreneurship, at least not without their control. And it's going to be really hard to survive financially. So that's a big reason to get into gold and silver. I'm going to continue harping on that as long as they continue, putting these promotions out and making laws and things that we've been seeing. I think it's important to be aware of this. And that's why I want to educate you guys and bring this information to you. Thursday, we're going to take a sneak peek at another big change in the financial system, which I haven't talked about yet, which is going to allow the debt system to operate within this great reset. It's going to debunk the theory that we're going to have this massive financial crash and everybody's going to run to gold and all of that other stuff. It's going to show that they're going to use the traditional debt system, but they're going to extend it. It's going to go through a transition, and eventually we won't have debt. And I'll talk about that in a later video, but they're going to use this debt system transition and to base financial value on in this great reset. So you're not going to do away with the euro and the dollar and the pound and the US treasuries. You're going to still have those. They're just going to be more closely managed, and it's going to be financialization and computerization, digitalization of all these things for better control by the algorithms, which will be controlled by the elites. What that will also do is reduce the ability of individual humans to get advantages in markets, because all the advantages will be found out by the computer systems, and those advantages will be transferred to the elites with the money. And then if you're trying to operate in a market, it's going to be rigged against you to where you're not going to be able to stand up to all of this infrastructure, this technical infrastructure that they're building. It's so, you know, and when they're devaluing your labor by doing negative interest rates in the bank accounts, which I talked about in the first IMF video about doing electronic money around the world, it's going to be harder to exchange your labor for fair value and maintain that value. I'll talk in later, this one's getting long. I'll talk in later values about how gold and silver comes into play here. Gold and silver will have a lot to do with value going forward. And if you're one that actually holds gold and silver, you're one of the lucky ones that can survive this system for as long as it lasts. I don't know if it'll last another 40 to 80 years like our previous system did, or whether it's going to collapse on itself. But gold and silver will help you last through that system, and you'll be able to transfer wealth down to your heirs as well and protect them. If you don't have gold and silver, I don't know what you're going to do. I honestly don't. But I'll explain where I think gold and silver in particular play into this new system and how it can protect you, but how these elite agencies are going to use it to edify their own strength. And we'll talk about lots of things regarding that probably in the coming weeks. So another segment in this video series, extremely important that you guys understand what's going on, that this has been in play for a very, very long time. It's not just the last year, and it's not born out of the virus crisis that we had in the US this year, starting in late February, March. This has been planned for several years. I showed you that video, and I showed you the research paper from the IMF, and they're just now bringing it out public now that they have a crisis to push this agenda. If you don't like the agenda, write your congressman, tell your friends, do whatever you can to make people aware, point them to this video and to my video series. And that maybe will help things, and maybe we can slow progress down a little bit. All right, till next time, guys, it's Robert Keens with goldsilverpros.com.